And now please welcome the University of Pennsylvania President, Dr. Amy Gutman.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see so many of you here on a beautiful, sunny Friday afternoon. Welcome to our 2013 Silfen Forum. I'd like to extend a special welcome on behalf of all of us at Penn to over 450 wonderful guests from as near as Philadelphia and Boston and as far away as Edinburgh, Jerusalem, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Melbourne. It is quite remarkable that as we gather together on this sunny Friday afternoon to explore open learning and the future of higher education, we have lots of skeptics in this country and the world about whether education, especially higher education, changes. So I would like to ask those of you here today that to join with me and think about this. One point. We'll have many other points to explore today. But I would ask that no one ever again doubt the endless capacity of education and innovation to inspire great minds to work together. And we have some great minds here today. This is our fourth Silfen Forum. The Silfen Forum is a public discussion of globally important issues featuring some of the foremost thinkers of our day. And it is made possible through the generous support and inspiration of University trustee David M. Silfen and his wife Lynn Silfen, who are here with us. David and Lynn, would you please stand up so we can thank you? So, I'd like to begin just to give an overview of our topic with a representative quote about new educational technology. This writer is skeptical. He says, and I quote, "It is to be mistrusted because it brings the appearance of wisdom instead of wisdom itself." Now, this could be a critique of online learning, Daphne, but the author is none other than Plato. And Plato was recording a dialogue between Phaedrus and Socrates in the year 370 BCE. What is the technology in question? What is the one that gives the appearance of wisdom instead of wisdom itself? The technology is writing. Socrates is suspicious that writing is, and again I quote, "an invention that will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it because they will not practice their memory." New educational technologies are almost always met with suspicion, with great suspicion, with skepticism, if not cynicism. Similar concerns were voiced again 1,800 years later with the invention of the printing press and the widespread introduction of the printed book. At that time, the purpose of the faculty was challenged as never before, but many times since. Why sit through a lecture to gain knowledge when on your own time you can simply read it in a book? And yet, from that time until now, our universities have not only survived, they have thrived. And they have changed dramatically as well. And we are here to talk about one such change, which certainly seems dramatic. So how do we wisely judge and prudently plan for the new internet technologies in education, particularly as we experience an explosion of massive open online courses, or what are now called, a new word in our vocabulary, MOOCs. This new educational technology burst on the scene just 5 years ago. Now, you've heard that failure is an orphan while success has many parents. Countless individuals and universities are willing to claim parentage of MOOCs. But it was Stanford, and it was a Stanford course on artificial intelligence that drew 160,000 students in the fall of 2011, and it really caused everyone to sit up and pay attention. The following year, 2012, became the year of the MOOCs. 3 different university collaborations, Coursera, Udacity, and edX, emerged to promote this new technology, and they offered very high-quality courses to anyone in the world with an internet connection who could speak the language, and they offered it for free. And then it turned out, even if you didn't speak the language, there'd be someone online who'd translate it for you. Penn is one of the founding partners of Coursera. Pleased to say there were 4 founders, Stanford, Penn, Michigan, and Princeton, and that was less than a year ago. Our faculty have since, just at Penn, completed 10 courses on the platform with a total enrollment of more than 450,000 students. And those are just the courses that we've completed. There are another 400,000 students enrolled right now. So those 450,000, just wrap your mind around that, are more than 18 times the total enrollment at Penn. So you begin to understand the possibilities and the opportunities that this new technology provides. But none of us knows exactly how it will play out. I have from the beginning called this a bold experiment. Are we headed for an educational revolution, or will this just allow us to do more of what we've always done, and in a somewhat new way? What are the opportunities, and what are the most likely unforeseen consequences? And I'm delighted to say that we have a stellar group of panelists with us today to answer my probing questions. I have the privilege of asking the questions, and they're on the spot for answering them. Those are the rules, guys. That's one of my few privileges as president. Tom Friedman is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and columnist who has been with the New York Times for more than 2 decades, serving in capacities that have ranged from Middle East bureau chief to chief diplomatic correspondent, White House correspondent, and international economic correspondent. Since 1995, he has served as the New York Times foreign affairs columnist, where he has written extensively on the ways in which new technologies like MOOCs transform the lives of individuals and the societies in which they live. His best-selling and Pulitzer Prize-winning books are read avidly around the world. I have every one of them on my bookshelf marked up and really absorbed them, and it is fabulous privilege, Tom. Welcome, Tom Friedman.
Thank you very much.
Martha Kanter has been the Undersecretary of Education in the Obama administration since 2009. She oversees policies related to post-secondary education, adult and career technical education, federal student aid, and a wide range of other White House educational initiatives. President Obama has set a goal for this country to have the best educated, most competitive workforce in the world by 2020 as measured by the proportion of college graduates. The President has charged Undersecretary Kanter with implementing the policies to make this happen. Prior to her appointment, she served as chancellor of one of the largest community college districts in the nation, located in the heart of California's Silicon Valley. So if there's someone who combines an understanding and appreciation of education and innovation, it is certainly Martha Kanter. She is the first community college leader ever to serve in the undersecretary position. Welcome, Martha. William Britt Kerwin has been Chancellor of the University System of Maryland for more than a decade. And we were just talking earlier, when I spent a year at University of Maryland, College Park, and Britt was then provost, a marvelous year, I should say, at a spectacular Center for Ethics and Public Policy. Previously, he served as president of Ohio State University, and before that as president of the University of Maryland, College Park. He is a widely respected, sought-after expert on the biggest challenges facing higher education in America, especially affordability, cost containment, and innovation. Chancellor Kirwan chairs the National Research Council Board of Higher Education and is in frequent communication with business leaders and government officials about the educational needs and requirements of the 21st century workforce. Welcome, Britt Kirwan. Daphne Kohler is the Rajiv Motwani Professor in the Computer Science Department at Stanford University. Her broad expertise includes machine learning with applications for systems biology and personalized medicine. In January of 2012, Professor Kohler helped usher in the era of MOOCs when she co-founded Coursera with fellow Stanford professor Andrew Ng. Coursera is a social entrepreneurship company that works with top universities to create exceptional online classroom education for free. By January of this year, Coursera included 62 university partners offering 300 classes with more than 2.5 million students enrolled. Welcome and thank you, Daphne. So let's get started. Okay, Daphne. You're on the spot.
I'm on
the
the
last
spot.
shall be first, as they say. So the New York Times called the year 2012 the year of the MOOCs. But online education has been here for 2 decades.
At least. More.
So is this hype, or is there something special about MOOCs?
I think there is something special about MOOCs, and it has to do it has to do with several things. First of all, there's the massive aspect of it, the M in the MOOC, and the O, the open in the MOOC, and neither of these were really characteristics.
So that's the big Mo, so to
That's
speak.
the big Mo. That's exactly right. I think that what we have been able to do by a combination of technology and design is to provide a truly outstanding educational experience to people everywhere at what is effectively a zero marginal cost per student. And this is something that reaches people who otherwise would never have access to the kind of educational experience that we at institutions like Penn or Stanford take for granted.
So Britt, Moody's said that MOOCs are a good thing for elite schools, but, and I have a quote here, there will be negative effects on smaller colleges that may be left out of online networks. Now, your system runs the gamut from what you would call a flagship state university to community colleges and so on. Do you see or do you expect dramatically different effects on different campuses?
I do, in fact, because I think College Park, for example, will be a producer of MOOCs. But my hope is that all of higher education can take advantage of new ideas, new innovations like MOOCs to address what I think is the most pressing issue facing our country, and that is our ability to educate the next generation of our population to the levels and quality degree that are demanded. And I think we are at great risk in the United States. We talk a lot about the competitiveness requirement for producing more graduates.
Yeah.
But what can't be overlooked is the social equity aspect. If you come from a family in the lowest quartile of income, you've got about an 8% chance of getting a college degree. If you're in the upper quartile of income, it's about an 80% chance. College has become the gateway to a good job and a successful career. We can't be the America we have been if we don't reach down and educate more low-income students. So this issue of cost and access can only be addressed, in my mind, in this era, through innovations like the MOOCs. And that's why I am so excited about the potential that they offer.
So we're beginning, I think of this as MOOCs 101, the basics here.
That's a very important point.
So the basics are that you can deliver a lot with a very low marginal cost. Is it going to work? We're talking about the basics. You said low-income students are the most left out. Right. And it's absolutely true. No matter how much outreach places like Penn do, and we do a lot, we are not going to capture all of those students. But are MOOCs promising? I began by asking about the hype. Are we promising, or are people in your neck of the woods of journalism who really are excited by this, are we promising too much?
Well, you know, I can't speak to the journalism side of it, so let me try to just put it in the context, because I think we tend to talk about all of these in separate boxes. That is the technology, education, and the workplace. Mm-hmm. And to me, they're actually seamlessly connected. What Daphne is talking about, the technology is intimately connected with what President Kerwin is talking about in terms of the social inequality aspect. Okay. So I will do the 1-minute version of The World is Flat, okay? Updated, because to me it's relevant.
The world is flat in 1 minute.
Right, in maybe 2. So, because I have one rule of business and life in a flat world, and that is whatever can be done will be done. Mm-hmm. The only question is, will it be done by you or to you? But just don't think it won't be done. Okay,
yeah, and Martha,
that's what produced.
About that, because I think when you say by you or to you, also is it going to be done by the United States or to the United States?
So that's where it starts. So,
and those of you from outside the country, this is constructive competition, right? Mm-hmm. We want you to compete. Go ahead.
So, you know, when I wrote The World is Flat, which was in 2004, what was I basically arguing? What was that I didn't mean we were all equal. What I meant was we'd created a platform where more people could connect and collaborate at zero cost from more places than ever before. And that was thanks to the merger of 3 things. The personal computer, which allowed everyone to author their own content in digital form. Second, the internet, which allowed people then to transmit their content digitally anywhere. And the emergence of what I call workflow software, in my own lingo, which allowed people to collaborate on each other's content. So that all came together between basically 1995 and 2004. I would argue what made Coursera possible, what made the MOOCs revolution possible, was a second revolution that has happened since 2004 until today. It's a huge inflection that happened but was disguised by the subprime crisis and post 9/11. But we are now living it. So my soundbite on this is very simple, that in 2004, I wrote The World is Flat. In 2011, I wrote a book, 12, That Used to Be Us, with my colleague Michael Mandelbaum. And when I sat down to do the new book with Michael, the first thing I did was get the first edition of The World is Flat off my bookshelf. And I opened the index and looked under A, B, C, D, E, F, F, A. Facebook wasn't in it. Okay. So when I was running around saying the world is flat, we're all connected, Facebook didn't exist. Right. Twitter was still a sound. The cloud was still in the sky. 4G was a parking place. LinkedIn was a prison. Applications were what you sent to college. Big data was a rap star, and Skype was a typo. Okay, so all of that.
Go ahead. You got to hand it to him.
All of that happened after I was arguing the world is flat. Right. So what's happened actually is that the world has gone from connected to hyper-connected in the last 7-8 years. It's a huge inflection. And the last point I'll just make related to this is what that has done, I believe, is that it has raised the whole global curve. If the whole world were a single math class at Penn, the whole global curve just rose because every boss now has cheaper, easier, faster access to more above average software, above average automation, above average robotics, above average cheap labor, and above average cheap genius. Hence, what I would argue the single most important socioeconomic fact of our time is that average is officially over. And when average is over, to take Dr. Kerwin's point, if you do not have a high school degree now, there is nothing for you down there. So, so the technology is related to the inequality, is related to the opportunity.
Right. And just to put this in very specific form, Coursera is mounting an advanced calculus course, and it just happens coincidentally to be given by a Penn professor named Robert Geist, who's actually here. I see Rob right over there. And this course is one of the first courses to get accredited by the American Council of Education. And if any of you have not logged on to see this course, you must, because it's visually stunning, because Rob is not only a great scholar and teacher of applied math, but he's an artist, and he knows Dante, and he draws this. This course is going to be available for everybody around the world, and we hope, and I know Rob hopes, that it will be something that inspires more people, more young people who don't have access to it in a traditional education sense to learn advanced calculus. Now, Martha, you're on the spot here, but in a good way. You really care about access and quality. And Secretary of Education Arne Duncan has said, and I quote, "Every capable, hardworking, and responsible student should be able to afford to go to college." That's not a Democratic dream or a Republican dream. That's the American dream. So here's a multiple choice quiz, right? Automatic grading would be easy, but I'm sure you'll have a somewhat untraditional answer to this.
Daphne, you're on to grade. Okay.
Right, you're right. Will
My
MOOCs,
engineers will deal with it, no problem.
will MOOCs, A, increase access, B, decrease the quality of education available to young Americans, C, both, or D, none of the above?
They will definitely do A and B, but none of the above. And they will do A and B. They will increase quality and decrease quality, so I would amend B.
Okay.
They have already increased access, so they will continue to increase access. That's a no-brainer. You all have seen the numbers.
Right, and that is a headline. I
But,
mean, that
yeah.
really is the headline, because there's no doubt, right? I just want to, this is quite remarkable because we're living through this. There is no doubt that they have already increased access. There is an autistic young person who took Al Filreese's American Poetry course online because that young person, because of his autism, couldn't do it in person. Right. That's amazing.
You know, I wrote about Coursera with Daphne, and we've been doing panels all year since then together, and we could do a duet.
Shucks,
but,
I thought you only came here.
But I was so struck in your introduction of her, because I wrote the first column about her in Coursera in May, and at the time it was 230,000 students, I think, Daph. Now it's 2.5, and each time we do a panel together.
3.2.
3.2, okay. Each time we do a panel together, and this is in the same calendar year
Right,
still.
right. No, I think of, and when we started, we were 4 universities. I see my provost, Vince Price, here, and he's really carried this forward for Penn. He and Ed Rock we move. Nobody should say that higher education can't move quickly when we want to move quickly and there's something to be gained. But just to piggyback on what Tom said, so I thought, less than a year ago, there were 4 of us. I thought of, being a lab scientist and having a Petri dish. And first you have 2, and then you have 4, and then you have 8, and before you know it, we have 62. And I looked at Daphne this morning, and I said, okay, do we have 124 now? Are we doubling? But it is quite remarkable, and it's good. But let me get back to Martha. So access and quality, how can we bring them together?
Right. So I had a meeting this week with the head of higher education in one of our 50 states. And he said he had just completed 4 MOOC courses in Introduction to Computer Science in 4 different MOOCs. And he said he had 4 incredibly different experiences in terms of what was taught, how those MOOC courses were taught, and what he came away with. My first question was, did you finish? He actually finished all 4 courses. So when I said in answer to B that it has the potential to increase quality and decrease quality, it is that variation that we in the federal government and in many people across the country want to ask the MOOC leadership, which are dispersed all over the world now.
No, they're all here right now,
Okay.
so you can ask them right here.
Okay.
They're here.
Ask the MOOC leadership to give us the best quality and continue giving us the best quality and demonstrate how you are giving us the best quality and what we're learning from what you're doing. So when I asked Daphne a couple of weeks ago who's taking MOOC courses, and I don't know if the numbers are the same, but you said 80% of MOOC takers in Coursera have baccalaureate degrees. And my next question, which is a question, who doesn't have a baccalaureate degree, and are they completing MOOC courses, and what levels of those courses? And a plea, I guess, to close this little comment that I have is, do MOOCs have the potential to teach basic math and algebra so we can get more students completing advanced calculus, so we can get more people ready for the jobs that are going to be here that Tom talks about?
It's a great question. Daphne?
And I think it's an essential step because, to speak to Britt's point, if we're going to raise the level of society within the United States, and equally or perhaps even more so in the countries around the world that need access to education even more so than we do here, you have to start from the basics. And the basics are introductory algebra, introductory physics, calculus, and then you bring them up to the next level of course and to the point that they can complete a baccalaureate degree. And I think it's absolutely essential that we provide that pathway to success for students who come in with so very little.
I wanted to comment on the quality issue because I think that's so central to this this discussion. We in higher education cannot meet our obligation to society looking to the future if we can't find lower cost means of delivering high quality higher education, overcoming what Bill Bowen calls the cost disease. And so the thing that excites me about the MOOCs, but I still have questions, is can they be used in traditional campuses to drive down the cost, but maintain the quality of the delivery? And we have to answer that question. We're actually running some experiments. We're working with Ithaca, the not-for-profit in New York, in partnership with Coursera, with funding from the Gates Foundation. Here at the University System of Maryland, we're running some side-by-side comparisons where classes are being taught in traditional ways, but we're using the MOOC in other classes, sections of the same class. And then we're going to compare the cost and the outcome. We've got to answer that question.
So let's be clear about this. Teaching is not the same thing as learning. And what we really care about is not what's taught, but what is learned. So what is, Daphne, the potential for assessing learning via MOOCs? In other words, the front page of the New York Times today, it's very hard to wake up any morning now and not see some article about MOOCs and online learning. And this morning, and it's not coincidental because it happens all the time now, front page of the New York Times had a story about a new automated online grading system that uses artificial intelligence. This is your field, Daphne. It uses artificial intelligence technology to instantly grade student assignments with no human input. Is the future of MOOCs in higher education that students learn with no human input except the creation of the MOOCs themselves? How do we best push MOOCs forward so that we know students, a high proportion of students are learning, not just that we're teaching them in technologically innovative ways?
So actually I'd like to answer first the middle part of your question rather, which is, do we hope that most students will learn without any human intervention? And that is certainly not our hope. I mean, for me, I think that the best model is the one that Chancellor Kerwin was just describing, where the MOOC content is embedded in a setting that has a live human instructor there to guide students,
and that's called the blended model,
blended
right?
model, or a guided MOOC, or you can call it what you will, but I think it's really important because that relationship, that personal relationship between a student and an instructor is something that's really special and unique.
Yeah.
And most of us can trace back critical decisions that we made in our lives and our careers to the role model or inspiration that we got from a teacher, a really unique teacher, a role model, and we don't want to take that human out of the loop. So assessments aside, I think that it's really critical to maintain, at least for those students who have that opportunity to attend a college and be mentored by a live human, I think that is a really important part of the experience. And you could do it based on really high quality content in the same way that you could do it before when going back to your quote, when the textbook was printed, you could do it based on a high quality textbook instead of just listening to.
I think it's really helpful to have a historical perspective and to understand that when the textbook came out, many people were proclaiming the end of in-class education, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. And the same thing is likely to be true for MOOCs,
That's exactly right. That's exactly
except that MOOCs have even a greater potential, Tom, for this globalization of education. There's nothing physically that you actually have to send around the world. It's right there in cyberspace. So Tom, you recently wrote that nothing has more potential to enable us to reimagine higher education than MOOCs. So what is it about MOOCs that gives them that potential? And is that true, do you think, as much for the kind of classic liberal arts and science courses, like as it is for a computer science course?
You know, I'm not, because I don't live in a university setting. I see it in a little broader context.
Okay.
So to me, one of the most exciting things when I think about MOOCs, first of all, just in terms of the timeline, if I were to compare this to search, Alta Vista just got invented. We haven't even seen Google yet.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, when we do our 550th panel in 5 years, I'm sure it's going to be totally different. So when I hear people saying, oh, this is overrated, it's Alta Vista just came out. So, I mean, this is so early. And then look at the speed of change already. That's number one. I think of it in terms of foreign policy. We're struggling now, say, with a country like Egypt, the Arab awakening. How do we respond to this? You know, imagine one way we respond to this, because this was so much a youth-led movement by young people feeling they're living in a world where they can see and touch how everybody else is living, appreciating that they're behind, and realizing that they cannot realize their full potential. And one of the ways we could actually both honor this movement and respond to it, other than selling more F-16s to the Egyptian Army and Air Force, imagine we rented 50 schoolrooms in Egypt, installed 50 computers in each room, got them a satellite uplink, high-speed bandwidth. They could take any Coursera course they wanted. We hired an English, Arabic-speaking instructor to be there 24 hours a day. The whole thing would cost us one F-16. And imagine the impact you could actually make that connects up with exactly what these young people want, which is the tools to realize their full potential. So I think this has just enormous possibilities. I just say one thing, again, to Britt's point about the importance of teachers. I'm here as a journalist. I was inspired by my 10th grade journalism teacher. It's the only journalism course I've ever taken.
Right, and
you know, I mean, it's
and you've had a campus-based college experience.
Exactly, and
so
I really believe that inspiration, you know, my friend Dov Seidman wrote a book called How. We were actually talking about this last night because, you know, during the Industrial Revolution, we made a small ask of people. We basically asked them to join a union, come to work every day, and do a repetitive task, whether it's in the service or the production sector. I'm speaking very gross generalization of the average worker. We're now making very big asks of people. We're asking them to do critical thinking and problem solving.
Yeah.
We're asking them to learn, relearn, and re-engineer themselves every year, okay? That's a very big ask. And I think, you know, the small ask you could do through motivating people through carrots and sticks. A big ask like that requires inspiration, okay? And that's why, you know, if you look at, I think, a lot of the most interesting education writing today, it says we have 3 objectives. One, we need that base of knowledge, the calculus, the physics. Can't do anything without that. Second, though, we now need critical thinking and problem solving. But third, persistence and motivation. Because there's one thing about this world. It enables, it inspires, it empowers, but it demands much more self-motivation. And that starts with, I think, an inspired teacher.
So Tom talked about what we could do in Egypt. Martha, what do you see we can do? What's your ask of us? We ask of the government a lot, but I remember I was inspired by, as were millions of others, by John F. Kennedy. Ask what you can do for your country. What can we as educators do? What can we do with this new technology, whether it's Brit running a large, you know, public system, or many of us here who run, you know, private universities? What can we do to make that access and quality come together?
So, you know, I'll just build off of Tom's comment on the word inspiration.
Okay.
And I'm reminded of Professor Duckworth's research that children lose hope in 3rd grade. Too many children lose hope in 3rd grade. 1 out of 4 children lives in poverty in the US. 42% of people are not prepared for college, much less how many hundreds of thousands are dropping out of high school. So one ask is, can the equity agenda be accelerated to close achievement gaps through MOOC education? And that is a very hard question to answer. It's going to be answered in a lot of different ways. Is the technology available? Is the access and affordability available? But if you just look at the whole spectrum of people who are in higher education and people who aren't, you have to really look at the pre-K through 20 pipeline, look at the places where things are broken. And that's why I mentioned the comment about algebra and the like, reading, writing, some basic education with the inspiration that will give kids at all levels and adults promise. We have 47% of Americans that read at the high school level of adult Americans.
So at every level, there are people who could be brought in and not lost, right? And the Khan Academy does it at a more basic level than Coursera does it. But at every level, we could bring more people in. And Britt, you see the full spectrum in your system. So how would you answer Martha's question? Can we bring more people in and lose fewer Americans to the inability? I mean, if you lose them, the inability to actually sustain themselves in the job market if they don't get.
That's such a critical question for our nation. I think the thing that gives me hope, and picking up on something Tom said, we are at the very early stage of MOOCs and other sorts of uses of technology in education. One of the powers that come from the MOOCs and other forms of innovation is using the internet and the technology. We're collecting data. And students know very quickly when they aren't getting the material. So there's instant feedback. I used to teach a large lecture calculus class to a room full about like this. And you know, every 6 weeks I would know if they were having trouble on something because I'd give a test. With the MOOCs and with these other forms of technology, we know instantly. Professors know. They can upgrade the quality of their teaching. And we can.
And that's the opposite of threatening. That is
exactly.
so
I mean,
reinforcing.
there's a continuous improvement in real time.
And you did it every 6 weeks. I used to teach, and one ethics in public policy, and one day after lecture, I saw hundreds of students.
Right.
One day I saw there was a notebook left open. A student just left her notebook there. So I needed to find out who the student was. So I looked at the notebook and I started reading her notes on my lecture. And I said, that's not what I said.
Right.
And it was a feedback loop that I did not have.
Right.
And this has the possibility, not just for
yes.
algebra, but for ethics courses of getting a feedback loop of what students are learning.
You know, there's this adaptive learning aspect of it in real time that is, I think, ultimately going to be one of the most powerful consequences of this technology.
So I actually like to think of this, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion of MOOCs as a way of decreasing costs, and I think there is an element to that. But for us, I think the biggest potential contribution here is access and quality. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for us to provide a much higher quality educational experience to students because of the instant feedback that the students get as well as the instructors get, because the students also know that they're not getting it, and they know that immediately, not 3 weeks later when they get their graded homework back. And so they have an opportunity to try and try again until they get it. There is this is something called mastery learning, and it has demonstrated educational benefits. I think that the blended learning format that has you getting guidance and help from an instructor that's targeted to your specific needs. You can get a group together of the 15 people who are not getting a particular concept and have a discussion with them so that they overcome the hurdle and move on to the next phase. I think there's tremendous opportunities for quality improvements, and that will give rise to cost improvements, because the biggest cost to us as a society are the students who fail.
So everyone's nodding and we agree. We agree, at least. We'll find out from the audience questions, but I got to it's my job to put you on the hook.
I'm used to it.
So you said, but let's put cost aside. So you're a professor at Stanford University. You're also founder of Coursera. The last I checked, Stanford, like Penn, has a total tuition and fees north of $50,000 a year. Coursera on its website aspires, and I quote, to educate millions for free. So what do you say to the Stanford parents who ask, why did our sons and daughters go through a rigorous admissions process and pay tens of thousands of dollars for something you're giving away to everyone for free?
Football.
No.
Don't tweet that. It's just a joke.
I don't think John Hennessy would give that answer.
So I think, first of all, that is a question that I could direct right back to you as the president of an institution whose tuitions
You
are not lower than Stanford's.
But you will get no other questions directed towards you if you do.
So I will give my answer and leave you to give yours later. I think that what a student gets at an institution like Stanford or Penn is qualitatively very different than what a student gets in the open access MOOC, because they do have the opportunity to come and engage in a meaningful, interactive dialogue with some of the greatest minds in their generation. The faculty who were very carefully selected by a rigorous different admissions process of faculty hiring by these institutions, and at the same time by peers who were selected via a similar rigorous selection admissions process, whether at the undergraduate or graduate level. So I think you get a really spectacular and unique experience by coming and spending those years on a college campus like Stanford or Penn. But that at the same time does not devalue the experience that you can give to people in this free MOOC. It might not be the same as what you get at Stanford, but it's pretty darn good anyway.
Yeah. So it's a fair enough question to redirect, because it's certainly a question that I've thought a lot about. And the first thing I would say, because it is the first thing that's happening while we're going from Alta Vista to Google, is that our faculty who are doing these MOOCs are also enriching their classroom experience by using them. So whether it's in Greek and Roman mythology by Peter Strzok or advanced calculus, there's the flipped classroom, even if it's not fully flipped. This is a new word in our vocabulary, new use of the verb flipped. They're flipping their classroom and putting much more interaction in the classroom, and our students can learn more online as well. And you know something? Our students love it. So it is a win-win. As we're creating more quality education online for students who cannot either be admitted or afford to take the time off for a 4-year residential college experience, we're also making our experience right here better.
That's right.
And I think that is the way that places like ours are going to increase access by also increasing the quality of the experience right here on campus. It's not the most thrilling thing to come into a classroom and just hear your professor speak to you and not have interaction. It's thrilling when you can maximize the interactive time.
Well, I think
So
one
if
of
I
the
can just-
byproducts of the whole MOOC movement and Coursera is going to be to force professors to take pedagogy seriously. I mean, I believe
And they want to do that.
Yeah, I think they do.
Really
I mean,
want,
I think
because
you need a
why
license.
did they choose this profession?
Yeah, I think you need a license to teach kindergarten in this country, but not physics at a university, you know. And there's now going to be a like button for every professor.
Yeah.
Just like we in the New York Times have the most emailed, you know, most viewed. You can see how a column, it has a lot of peculiarities, but you've got to take communication seriously now. You can't just show up and say, I'm just going to give my lecture, read my book notes or whatever.
Right.
And pedagogy, I think, will really benefit from that.
No,
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
People often ask me, relating back to a question that's already been asked, which institutions are going to be threatened by this revolution? Is it the publics or the privates? It is the top tier, middle tier, the community colleges? And my answer is that that is not the right stratification, none of these. The institutions that will be threatened are the ones whose only value proposition to their students is the dissemination of content. The ones who do not understand that they need to provide to their students a value proposition that transcends that.
Because why is higher education so important for our time? It's not to get content. I mean, you need content to be creative and innovative, but it is to develop your capacity for creativity and innovation. So Britt, you're a former chair of the board of directors of the American Council on Education, and it recently provided credit recommendations for some of Coursera's MOOCs. What do you think the significance of credit-bearing MOOCs will be for American higher education?
It's absolutely critical. We can't get to where we need to go unless we can figure this out. How we give credentials and credit for MOOCs. I think what we're trying to do within our university system is to bring the MOOCs into our traditional classroom settings in certain types of courses. But just across the country, we've got to figure this out about course credit. Hopefully, we can use MOOCs with high school students who want to go to college, and they come to college with credits already in place. Look, we give credit by examination all the time. Kids get credit for that. Why not let them get credit by examination for a MOOC? So absolutely, we've got to figure this out, and I think what the ACE is doing is a very positive step.
So part of pushing this question a little bit, I had a meeting with some Research One University presidents recently, and I asked a question. I am a senior in high school. I got accepted to your university. I met all your selection qualifications. And in my senior year, I took all of your MOOC courses with your MOOC professors, and I want to come in as a sophomore. Can I? Basically, he said, no, you've taken alien credit. We will give you credit for 2 semester courses, but we need to socialize you for the full 4 years, and you need the experience. And after that, I was visited by another president of a Research One university, and I said, what do you think your university is going to look like in 5 or 10 years as a result of MOOCs? And he said, well, probably be a 3-year university and take sophomores, because we will want to pack on our advanced degrees to that, what would be the senior year in college. So I think, MOOCs are making us question, what are the business models in American higher education? Who's going to get in, and how will universities change? And we're already seeing the starting of 3-year universities. So
here,
back to you.
Yeah, so that sounds quite revolutionary, a quarter of the time reduced. So let me tell you a story of one person who applied to college way back in 1967 to an Ivy League university that I think you all have heard of, and I got sophomore standing. That university had I could have graduated in 3 years. AP courses. That university still gives sophomore standing. Now, the moment I got there, and I wanted to be a math major, so I started as a sophomore as a math major, and then I got inspired by political philosophy and thought that math was, sorry Rob, too easy. You could come to you got QED, and wasn't as interesting, although I still am fascinated by it, as political science, and I went on to take 4 years. But things that people feel are so scary and revolutionary, some of those things have been around and they just haven't been used that much. We could use 3-year and 4-year experiences. You can give students the options. A lot of students, I can tell you, who come don't want to graduate in 3 years if they don't have to, because you do learn creativity, you develop relationships. But I don't see this as, I see this as a welcome development. We have a really varied system of higher education. Why not vary the number of years that it takes for, depending on what a student can do? Yeah. So, but I think people now think, oh my God, it's going to be a 3-year experience, where we've had the possibility of 3-year experiences. Not that many students in Ivy League universities want to take it, but bless them if they do. So Daphne, in a 2012 interview with The Atlantic, you said about MOOCs that the tsunami is coming whether we like it or not. You can be
John Hennessy.
This is a very California quote, I have to say, because she goes on to say you can be crushed or you can surf. And it's better to surf. So I want to ask anybody here, what do you think higher education needs to do in order to surf, to ride the wave rather than be crushed by it? You want to start?
Sure. And let me first attribute the quote correctly. This is John Hennessy's quote. So I was adopting it.
Good.
I think that in order to surf, an institution really needs to think, as I said, about what is the value that it provides to students. And that value has to transcend pure content, and it even has to transcend just being a diploma mill and giving somebody a diploma at the end. You need to be in a position that you engage your students in meaningful ways that are more than just content. And that can be creative problem solving, project work, internships in labs, internships in industry. I think there's a tremendous variety of ways that institutions can provide remarkable value to their students, and institutions need to do that.
Tom, what do we need to do?
Well, I would pick up on what Daph said, which is I think it's this hybrid model, which is to get the best out of what the on-campus experience can offer, and that intimate contact with other students and professors, and at the same time leverage both for economic reasons and because of what it can offer, an online course, that the technology is making available. So I think we will move in that direction. I'm very excited about it.
So like a lot of the online ventures that began, there was not a clear cost model for them, a clear profit model, sustainability. In order for us as universities to bend the cost curve or even keep the cost curve constant, we need to find some way of getting revenues from MOOCs.
Well, you know, I just pick up one point.
How are we going to do that?
Yeah. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I have a daughter at Stanford right now, so I happen to know what the tuition is, and in graduate school. And I don't think this model is sustainable. I'm struck at the number of my two daughters, one's 24, one's 27, the number of their friends who have jobs but are not on career tracks.
Right.
There's a difference between a job and a career. And I really am struck by the number of them who I've spoken to lately who will confide in me. I have $100,000 in loans. I have a huge burden these young people are carrying into the world after taxes. And they are not on career paths. They're in jobs, teaching English in Istanbul or in Dubai or any number of things. And I think, again, because of this inflection, we may be in for a long period like this where the ability to generate the income to pay these loans back. And I don't think this is going to be a quick or easy thing. I think the model of higher education is going to blow up. If it cannot find a cheaper way.
Well, you've just deepened the problem, because I was asking how we could sustain the online courses by getting revenue, and you've just deepened it and saying we can't sustain the. I
think what's going to happen
I'm glad, because we've been on a high here of all the great things that MOOCs can do. So let's get real. What is it?
Right. If you ask me in 5 years, you will come to your college-age son or daughter and say, look, would you like to go to Stanford or Penn and have that campus experience and the T-shirt and the hat and the network and all that?
It's more than that.
Or would you basically like to have 20 Coursera degrees? Certifications. I mean, yeah, that's right. Do you want a Penn degree or do you want a collection of certifications? The whole thing will cost you, probably less than $5,000, probably far less than that. And by the way, you can take Amy Gutman on ethics. You can take Daphne Kohler on applied learning. I think that's the choice a lot of parents are going to be giving to their kids very quickly. And when you think about, and this is a point Tony Wagner made, the world doesn't care what you know anymore. It only cares what you can do with what you know. That's all it's going to pay off on.
But do you learn to do through online education, or do you learn to do more by actually having interactions with fellow human beings? And
well, Daphne can tell you about the interactions her online people have with each other.
And I think some of your own courses have actually demonstrated that one can interact in very deep ways. So, for example, the design course from Carl Ulrich here at the Wharton Business School, people did these amazing projects as part of this semester-long course, and they got 40 different pieces of feedback from different students throughout the course, telling them what was wrong with their designs. And so I think it's naive at this point in this generation to assume that interaction can only be obtained in a face-to-face setting. I have two daughters, they're 8 and 10, they sit in adjacent rooms chatting each other on the computer, and they seem to enjoy that. So I think that there's a lot of meaningful interaction that happens in the online format, but I still don't think it's a substitute for an on-campus experience. The question is, do you really need 4 years of that? Or as we said earlier, can you make do with 3 or 2 and reduce costs in some way that way?
And it's not just the question of whether you need 4 years of it, it's also the question, does everyone need the same thing? We have a very distinctive higher education sector in this country in which there is no other country that has as diverse a set of institutions of higher education as we have. And the philosophy that goes along with that is one size doesn't fit all. So this MOOCs allow a set of variants on a very important theme of how you teach creativity and innovation. Britt, what do you see happening? You oversee the whole range.
Well, I think the crisis in our country really around education has to do with public higher education. You know, quite frankly, Penn and Stanford and Harvard and Princeton, they're going to keep going on just like they can if they so desire. But 70% of Americans in higher education are in public higher education. Public higher education has been devastated by the economy. There's been a 28% reduction in state support for public higher education in the last 2 years. And so we can't be the America we have been and want to be in the future unless we find lower cost means of delivering high quality education to larger numbers of people. This tells me that higher education, public and private, has an obligation that they've never had before. We have got to find these new innovations that are going to enable us to educate larger and larger numbers of people, and that's why you know, we're such a fan of the experiment with the MOOCs.
So here's my worry. My worry is that the more, the better the MOOCs become, the more the most advantaged students are going to take advantage of them. There's just no doubt that the students that we interact with most of the time just love, they go on, it's all additive. They go online, they interact online, they go in the classroom, they interact there, here, they go on the playing fields and they learn teamwork, they go on stage and they learn acting, and it just gets better and better. And I do think we have a great higher education sector at the top. And I think many of our state universities are great, but they're getting bled. So the worry is that online education will be a little bit like, at the highest level, what Montessori school was. It was created for the slum children in Italy and Rome, and it became the hottest thing for the most advantaged children to get a leg up in learning. Is that, I mean, we think of this as access, but are we kidding ourselves? Are the rich going to get richer, so to speak, and the poor not?
I just give you one warning.
Okay.
Everything that happened to media is about to happen to education. And we at the New York Times, we thought, we're the New York Times. We're the pen of the news business. Watch out.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing MOOCs, right? That's why we didn't say, sorry, we're not going online. And the New York Times is surviving because it went online.
But it's been a challenge, and we really had to adjust and adapt in a big way.
The New York Times has a great online presence, and that's what we want as well. So you're right. If we were complacent, that's what would happen. Sure thing. But I wasn't talking about us as institutions, Tom. I was talking about who's going to benefit, which students are going to benefit, how we're going to develop this,
well, I go back
taking
to one,
up Martha's challenge.
To one thing.
How are we going to develop this so we really are giving access to learning to the students who are not already, just getting it? And part of it's the motivation. Are those students going to be motivated to do this? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that to go back to something I said earlier, there is something about this new world, which incredibly enables, incredibly empowers, and incredibly requires self-starters.
Exactly.
Self-motivated people. And you are not going to change that. That is the new world, The old days where, you could join the union and count on a lifelong career and be on that track, that's over. And so that awareness has to be built into education now, from preschool right up through college.
And that's why I think the human factor, having blended learning courses, what Britt said earlier, is going to be so important. Because if we just put things online and think that that's going to truly increase access to living a productive, educated life, we're kidding ourselves. I think we have to also have the human beings who use those courses to help motivate students and get them when they hit a blockage in the road, get them over that block.
I mean, I think we're
Martha.
underestimating the power of technology to become something very different than it is right now. So I loved your analogy about Alta Vista.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I remember when we put in a planetarium some years ago, I watched with a lot of elementary school kids this flight through the human heart. And I was watching the DNA, and I was thinking to myself, if only I could get that projected out of the computers, out of the iPads, I could have kids taking apart a human heart, putting it back together again, and they might get that inspiration from doing with the faculty, with the guided instruction, with all the things that Daphne is talking about. So I do kind of keep a temperature on how quickly the technology is moving, because I kind of feel like we're talking about blended learning in the sense of using what we have in Coursera, and you know, you're certainly the forefront in the MOOCs, but I also think the technology is moving so quickly that the face-to-face interaction and the quality, the pedagogy question, all of those are going to be changing over time while we're trying to do all of this.
Right, Daphne.
Well, I'd like to take this question of access and take a more global perspective on this. 40% of our students are in the developing world. A lot of these students are extremely motivated. They just don't have access because it just does not exist in their country with sufficient capacity. I've talked to people who taught in these little villages in Africa, you know, under a tree. They don't even have a schoolhouse. And they say that these kids are super motivated. I mean, they come in and their homework is always done, and they're, you know, they learn as much as they possibly can given the surroundings that we're able to provide them. This, I think, is another form of access that we shouldn't neglect when we think about the opportunity here.
Yeah, so let's talk just a little about the global nature of this. Tom, how does America compete globally with this amazing access now to MOOCs?
Well, I think it's from one point of view, just from a kind of American branding point of view. Let's go back to that Egyptian school, you know, I imagine, and that, you know, outside is a little American flag. This school brought to you by the United States of America. It's a totally different way for us as a community and as a government, I think, to relate to the world. You know, what I find when I travel, I studied Arabic and Middle East history as an undergrad, but I wish I'd studied education, because everywhere I go in the world, I find that education is actually the biggest foreign policy issue. Everywhere I go in the world, that's the #1 subject. And here's what's really interesting. Everywhere you go, everyone thinks they're behind. You go to Singapore, and boy, it's very interesting. You go to Singapore,
and you know something, they're all right.
Yeah, well, they are all right. So you go to Singapore, and their kids are killing it on the math PISA test, and they think they can't invent a hula hoop, you know. And you know, then you come to America, and Johnny and Susie can't read, but Billy, you know, who's got a ring in his nose and a ponytail, and Susie's got a tattoo on her cheek, just invented 3 new Apple iPod apps. So I mean, we have weaknesses that we've got to deal with. They've got weaknesses they've got to deal with. I think what you're going to see, the more hyper-connected the world gets, is a grand convergence. And this provides a huge opportunity, I think, for our higher educational systems to participate in the world in a really constructive way that meets up with the aspirations of 99% of the people out there.
And I can't help but say, given that we have a member of the administration with us, that we must reform our immigration laws to welcome people to this country who want to contribute to it, really. So I'm going, because I want to get to the audience for questions, I want to, before we open the floor to the questions of this very eminent group of participants in the audience, let me pose a big sky wrap-up question to each of you. And I want each of you to put yourself on the line. It's April 2023. That sounds like a long time from now, but it's only 10 years, last I checked. And we've gathered again to talk about educational innovation and technology and online education. And I ask you, so were these MOOCs an incremental step in higher education, or has there been a revolution in higher education?
For me, the answer is pretty clear. I mean, it's going to be a revolution. And I think it's very hard to see exactly where it's headed. And I think we're going to come to have seen the MOOCs as being a critical step along the path of this, toward this revolution. But I have no doubt, and I bet Daphne would agree, that by 2023, we won't recognize the MOOCs of that day in terms of what we're seeing right now.
So I agree. I think this is a revolution, and I see the revolution happening on three separate fronts. First, I think it's the democratization of education, the conversion of education from something that's a privilege of the few to a basic human right. I think it's the transformation of the quality of education that we offer to our on-campus students in a sector that has not changed the way it does business in 350 years, that I think in 10 years we'll look back at the days that we were shoveling students into an auditorium and lecturing at them for an hour and a half twice a week as how did we ever do that long? And I think the third opportunity for tremendous growth is in understanding human learning as a data science rather than an anecdotal science, because the data that we can collect here is going to give us tremendous insights about how people learn and how to teach them better that will give rise to what Britt just said, that we will not recognize the MOOCs of 10 years from now relative to where we are today.
Martha?
I see it in two ways. The revolution could be very positive and echo what Daphne and Britt are saying. I think if the digital divide widens any further than it already has, we are going to have a different kind of revolution, and that worries me, that keeps me up at night, because if we don't provide access to the underprepared folks, to the poor people, to the people that really don't have hope across the world, then I don't think MOOCs will have reached their full potential. And I don't even think they're going to look like MOOCs in 10 years. I think we'll have a whole new methodology of learning. We'll have better pedagogy. It's a question of, are we going to really lift this nation?
So I'm really glad that when you answered it, you also addressed who the winners and the losers will be, and to keep our eyes that we have as few losers as possible, but there are always winners and losers in this. Tom, you have the...
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. I would just point out, as I was writing it this morning, I picked up Google News, and I saw that Anonymous had just taken down North Korea's websites, basically, hacked their Twitter account.
Yeah. Can't imagine who that might be.
And so that is the first, if I were writing about it, I may do a column on this, so don't tell anybody. That's the first crowdsourced war.
Yeah.
Okay. We just saw a battle that was crowdsourced to Anonymous. So I see MOOCs in a much larger context of crowdsourcing. It's crowdsourcing education. We're seeing crowdfunding. We're seeing crowd innovation now. We're seeing an act of crowd warfare. Yeah. And I think the only thing that will be recognizable about this place in 2025 or whenever is the architecture.
And maybe not even that?
Not sure.
It'll be recognizable. But that is a great segue. Change we're in the midst of change, and yet you're all here in Irvine Auditorium, which is recognizable from its outset. And I want to open it up to the audience for questions. There are roving mics, so all you have to do is raise your hand, and I will call on you when I see you out there. I see someone right here, this young man right there in the second row. Please stand up, introduce yourself.
Thanks. Hi,
putting his computer aside, no doubt, having been surfing the web while
I was taking
we were
notes, I
talking.
swear. My name is Dhruv, and I'm a sophomore. And I've gotten to take a lot of really cool classes that involve community engagement, such as Management 100 and Urban Studies, where we sit down, we think about the problems that we see in the community, and we actually work to solve it. So my question is two parts. The first is, should local community empowerment be a goal of higher education? And two, how should MOOCs facilitate that?
Who'd like to take a shot at answering?
I can take a shot at
Definitely.
the second part. I mean, I think that certainly community empowerment should be a goal of higher education, but that's on the instructors and universities are really the ones that should decide how that gets done. But in terms of enabling that, part of the reason why MOOCs today are so different, to come back to your very first question, Amy, about what's different about this new generation, is the fact that it leverages community and crowdsourcing and human interaction in a way that earlier efforts at online education did not. I think that it's exactly a perfect vehicle, or it will evolve to become even better, I think, for allowing that kind of community models in higher education.
So
Great.
here's just a quick request. Yes, community empowerment is critical. It is a role of American higher education. There are hundreds of colleges and universities that have courses, programs, centers in community empowerment. The question is, if you think of young people and their aspirations, and the fact that we have data saying that 60% of young people apply to only one college in the US. One aspect of community empowerment could be to use the MOOCs to allow families, to give families the opportunity to make better choices than we're seeing in this country.
And that is a huge divide in this country. So that would be enormously empowering if that happened. And there are people, now I can see back, great, because I couldn't see any further back. I'm going to call on the young woman over there in the corner. Yes, you?
I have a question for
Please
introduce
yourself.
Oh, my name's Marianne Lear. I'm with the Penn Fund here at the University of Pennsylvania. And I have a question specifically for Mr. Friedman. You elaborate in your book, The World is Flat, that the world is becoming more on the same playing field as time goes on with the increases in technology across the world. However, you mentioned that everyone outside the US feels like they are behind. Do you believe that that gap is going to last for a substantial amount of time? Do you feel that the world is going to become more competitive with time with the US?
Yeah, I really do. And I think institutions like Coursera and the whole MOOCs phenomena is really going to enable that by giving really the best world-class education to more people in more places. But I think that, I'm always a little leery when people say it's going to become more competitive. That means like there's a lump of labor, we've got it, now they're going to have it, And I don't actually think that's how it works. That I think what all this will allow, first of all, what's really exciting to me, we're going to leverage 1 billion more brains to solve the biggest problems in the world, men and women. That's, I think, the most exciting thing about this. 10 years from now, there's going to be 1 billion more people on the planet with the tools and capability to solve some of the biggest problems. And at the same time, what they're going to invent, God only knows. One of the examples I gave in the book, your son or daughter goes off to college 10 years ago. They come back from Penn after their first semester. They say, Mom, Dad, I decided what I want to be when I grow up. Oh, what do you want to be, honey? I want to be a search engine optimizer. I say, what the hell are you talking about? I sent you to college. You can't be an ophthalmologist or a lawyer. You're going to be a search engine optimizer? Well, what is search engine optimization? The whole industry came out of nowhere. Because if I'm in the tennis shoe business and Amy's in the tennis shoe business, whose tennis shoes come up first when you put tennis shoes into Google became a huge economic advantage, produced a multi-billion-dollar industry overnight. So God only knows when 1 billion more people start applying their brains to the problems of the world, what new jobs and industries will emerge. There's only one thing I can tell you, though. And that is that in this hyper-connected world, every job, every middle-class job, is either going to go up, out, or down faster than ever. That is, it'll either require more education, whatever it is, if it's going to be a decent job, more people in the world will be able to compete for it and do it in different ways, and it'll be outsourced to history faster than ever, made obsolete. That's what hyperconnectivity is doing. Every job today is going up, out, and down faster than ever.
Wow, okay, right here on the aisle in red.
Hi, I'm Sarah Gabriel, Wharton 79, and I've been taking a lot of courses, a lot of the Coursera. I'm having so much fun with that. I really resonate with that issue of people who, everybody has access now. The question is how people come in and how people finish classes, and that whole idea of motivation. And having learned from a lot of different systems here, in fact, when I was an undergraduate, one of the strongest models that I learned was adherence to therapeutic regimens in a study with Jack Hershey that we did. And 35 years of research has taught us that there are 3.5 significant factors for success there: intrinsic motivation, access to resources, social support. So the people come in with some intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
The access is totally there. The social support, to me, is the one that is the weakest. Coursera, a bunch of the courses now are trying to get groups together. One I was in recently, I know, postponed itself because it was unable to do that. It got very confusing. Others, to me, that's the key. It's like the discussion forums are beautiful and wonderful, but how do you really do social?
So what's
and
the
get that social support?
Good. So what's the social support for?
To get the at-risk lower to come and
right.
do.
Absolutely.
So I think that the one answer to that is that this is one of the things that will be most rapidly evolving over the coming years. How do you leverage ideas from social networking as well as from other disciplines like gamification in order to increase student engagement and social interaction on the platform? I'm sure we'll develop much better techniques 3 years from now than we have today. But at the same time, it comes back to this recurring theme of blended learning. That is having an actual mentor, and specifically for those populations that you mentioned, the ones that don't have as much intrinsic motivation and that are most at risk, they're the ones that I think could really benefit perhaps the most from having that blended learning experience with an instructor there with them in the classroom, helping to retain them, engage them, and overcome hurdles.
Amy, I mean, the point here is that the use of MOOCs in sort of traditional residential campus. Two of the issues that they're facing in the general dissemination are addressed. You've got the social support.
Right.
You've got the credentialing, and so you know, I think that makes them very adaptable to traditional campuses.
And one of the things MOOCs can do is share outcomes, figure out, you know, are the socialization treatments really benefiting different kinds of students, students like me, students like you, who really is going through and what do they need. So I think, you know, Tom's and Britt's and Daphne's point about we're really at the beginning. We're really in the Alta Vista world, but I think there's great promise.
It's also the case, I know a lot of people have bemoaned the fact that younger generations, the millennials, are just connected electronically and not face-to-face. But that actually isn't true. They're connected electronically, and then they're also connected face-to-face, and they often do the same simultaneously, which may seem like bad etiquette, but I, who had a Jewish mother who would have felt very comfortable being on a Vaporetto in, you know, going from Venice out to the, you know, out to the islands where I'm sitting there and all the Italian women are talking simultaneously and listening to one another at the same time. Our young people, we just have to get used to it. They've really learned a kind of interaction that's different from ours. But the social support is obviously necessary, but it isn't exclusive of the technology. It has to be married with the technology. Okay, yes. Michael Della Carpini, right there. Oh, you didn't? Okay, I thought you did. Back there on the aisle, yes. I thought you did.
Hi, my name is Gautam. I'm Wharton
Great.
grad 2010 and currently an entrepreneur straddling Silicon Valley and India. My question is, assuming that this is a revolution that we are at the very early stages of, what kind of services and products would you like to see entrepreneurs create to help herald this revolution?
Boy, the list is endless. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to develop learning tools that are shareable and reusable. And these learning tools can go all the way from grading for chemical experiments and simulations, all the way to creation of social groups and interaction and everything in between. So I think it's really unbounded and up to your imagination.
You know, there's one thing I would add to what Daphne said, which I totally agree with, and I was just in India and met an Indian startup company that is doing this, and that is basically certification. Because as more and more people are going to develop a body of MOOC classes and expertise basically outside traditional universities, I think developing independent bases of certification that you know you've passed a certain level of competency, whether it's to be a plumber, an electrician, or a physics teacher, I think is going to be another one of these growing new industries. The company's called Metal, M-E-T-T-L, and that's exactly what they've kind of seen what Daphne's doing and say, well, if that's going to go there, then all kinds of people are going to need something other than a pen degree they can get from Amy.
Right.
And if we can develop a system for doing that, that's going to be very important.
Could I, Amy, just add a
Sure.
yeah, you know, something I think is very important is the sophistication of the learning platforms and their ability to support adaptive learning and learning analytics. I think that needs to be built in ever greater sophistication into the MOOCs and other forms of online learning.
I think this young man wants to know what to get to work on for the next innovation that can help us. All the more power to you. Yes, over there.
Hi, my name is Elena Vilchakaki. I'm founder of Chuzito, and I'm a very big fan of MOOCs. And I really love the potential that MOOCs have for the self-motivated, lifelong learner. So I'm totally siding with that. I have a question, though, about the flip classroom issue. If MOOCs indeed are used to flip the classroom, and therefore provide a much better quality interaction at the universities, at the colleges, which means that then content will not be the issue, everybody will learn the content, but the universities will have this opportunity to better educate students with the 21st century skills. They will have more opportunity for creativity, for critical thinking, etc. If that happens, how do we make sure that we don't give an unfair, that we're not catering to equality, that we're not creating a more elite education where the people that graduate from universities, top-level universities, will be even more competitive. And then, of course, we will have all the rest that will be better educated, but not necessarily competitive.
And that will be the last question. It's a worthy question for our panelists to answer. How do we make sure that the graduates of the elite universities aren't even better equipped?
They will be better equipped,
Good.
but so will everybody else. I think it's important to recognize that we can't solve all problems all at once. And even if we can't get everyone to a level of absolute equality, if we can give creative, self-motivated individuals who do not currently have access to the top universities, access to that content in a way that their creativity can then manifest because they have such a better foundation to build on. We might not have achieved equality, but we're certainly a heck of a lot better than where we are today, where they have very little access to any of that.
You know, I would add one thing to that, which is that one of the fundamental truths about globalization, having been in this debate for a long time, is that the bottom rises faster and the top rises higher at the same time. And that's what we sometimes miss, and you can't control that. But I think that what is so exciting...
Could I just interrupt for a moment? As a moral philosopher, I would say as long as the bottom rises above standards of decency, adequacy, ability to live a good life and choose, we shouldn't try to keep the top down.
Absolutely.
We should be focusing on getting everybody, everybody up. So that's the challenge.
Well, and just to add to that, and it ties into the young man's question there and the young lady's question back there, which is the reason if Coursera were a stock, I'd buy it right now, is that this is coinciding with something that's going on with globalization that I think is, again, people aren't seeing, has been disguised by subprime crisis and post 9/11. That's very important. We're seeing the emergence of a virtual middle class. I've seen it in India and I've seen it in Mexico. Now, what is this? So the price of connectivity has fallen so low. Thanks to Daphne, the price of education is now falling so low. And the price of now your handheld computer is falling so low. There are a whole new billion people walking around the planet with middle-class aspirations, middle-class identity in their own mind, just not a middle-class wallet. And what's happened basically in India and in Mexico, because I've been to both recently, I've seen, so I wrote The World is Flat because what happened around that book was that we got just enough connectivity that 1 million Indian engineers could solve our problem. What was that? They could remediate computers for Y2K. What's happening now with the falling prices of all these tools, connectivity, and now education is that they're solving their problems. And that floats my boat, okay? And what you're seeing now is the emergence of a vast virtual middle class. I just end with one point. Think of the 23-year-old young woman who was tragically raped in India. Her father was a baggage handler at Delhi airport working a double shift, making $50 a month. That and selling a little land in his home village allowed him to put her through 3 years of physiotherapy school. He called her a doctor. She went to the mall to see The Life of Pi with her boyfriend and didn't have cab fare home. So she tragically took a gypsy bus, and that's where the rape happened. She is the epitome of the virtual middle class. And this is going to revolutionize politics in that part of the world. And Coursera is going to meet right up with that. Fasten your seatbelt and put your seat back and tray table into a fixed, upright position, okay?
And on that note, I'm going to ask us to all thank Tom, Martha,